Hello guys, Dan Jackson aka Dan's the Engineer here. I am in Bali and it is beautiful. Check out this pool. Ooh, private pool, lovely place. So here we are. This video is going to be about how to prevent non-payment. I get so many people contact me about this. They ask for my advice all the time, so I thought I'd do a nice little video. So let's set this up here. Set the camera up. Right, just gonna turn the aircon off so you guys can hear me. So, how many of you have experienced a non-payment or regular late payments and it becomes a bit of a chore trying to get paid? Obviously, it can create a lot of stress within your day-to-day business. It can cause you a lot of stress at home because you're not getting paid, you need to pay the bills. It is a big problem in the industry. So, these are my top tips. Tip number one, select your customer. Now, don't always believe that somebody who's asking you to do work is a good customer, they're a paying customer. They're only a good customer if they pay their bill. So how do you do this? Now, if you're working for commercial, you can do a credit check. So there's all sorts of things. I used to use Credit Safe actually, who are pretty good. And you can do credit checks on commercial clients. You can look into directors. You can look at their general accounts behaviours to see if they flag up basically if they're bad payers. You can also do a Google search. It's always worth doing a little Google of the company because you might find a forum, you might find something that has some information about them, and also check that they are an established company. You don't want to work for a company that's giving you a 50 grand order if you've got no information about this company at all. And again, a lot of people seem to think that somebody coming to them and say, I'm going to pay you, $1,000 for this job or whatever. They're all excited, like, oh yeah, I've got this new job, this job's coming in. It's only good if you are getting paid, just remember that. Now, for the domestic market, obviously, that can be quite tricky. I'm very big on where you advertise for your work. For example, if you get your work off of Facebook, you get a Facebook customer. Now, Facebook customer, if you've ever used Facebook Marketplace, it is dog shit. Basically, people will drive costs down. Like you say, you try and sell something for $5, like people are trying to pay £1, or they'll say, okay, yeah, I'll come pick it up, and then they'll be like, oh, I'll give you £2 less. People are always bargaining. It's like the lowest of the low. You can get work through it all day long. Yeah, cool, happy days. But again, it's only good if you are getting paid. So there's various ways of advertising through social media, through Google. People can come to your page. There's also all these review sites where they can come and find you, but just have a think about, if you're going on Checkatrade, you've got to bear in mind it's a Checkatrade client. If you're going on Yale.com, it's a Yale.com client. If you go on Facebook, it's a Facebook client. Just have a little think about where those clients are coming from. Now, the other little thing I used to do, which helped me kind of decide if it's a decent customer or not, is I always, for new customers, if they were domestic, I would make them pay a deposit. Now, when I found that somebody was arguing or having a bit of a huff about paying a deposit, I usually find that they are a bad payer. So if somebody's more than willing to pay a little bit of money up front, I tend to find, obviously it doesn't happen all the time, they are more willing to actually pay you when the final bill. Whereas if somebody's arguing, go away, I'm making a video. If somebody's being a little bit funny about paying you up front, bear in mind quite often you have to fork out some before you've even done the job. Alarm bells ring. The next thing, number 2, is detail your quotation. Now, I say this all the time, make sure your quotations are detailed. And it's really important because it is a document to say what they are getting for their money. If you just put on your quote, install 4 sockets, what does that mean? Where are they? What type of brand are they? How are you going to do it? How long is this going to take? Detail the quotation, then there's no arguments. The whole point of it is making sure that they know exactly what they're getting and paying for, so they don't, you do the work and they're like, well, actually, I thought it was this, I thought it was X, Y, and Z, or, we spoke about something different. If it's in writing and it's detailed, they can't argue, therefore, they're kind of like, well, okay, I know what I'm getting. If everybody's clear from the outset, it helps everybody get towards the end. If there's any interpretation that's incorrect and inaccurate, that's when problems can evolve. So make sure it's a detailed quotation. Say, install 1 socket in the kitchen, MK, Logic, or whatever, and state how you're going to do it. I know it takes a little bit of time to do a little bit more admin wise because you're taking longer to quote, but if you have some templates made up, it can be actually quite nice and easy and quick. So detail the quotation. Now, when you send a quotation, make sure you send the terms and conditions. It's so important. Now, terms and conditions are basically the thing they're agreeing to, and it can stand up in court what they're agreeing to do. Now, terms and conditions can be anything. Now, people always say, shall I go to a solicitor and have them professionally written up? Now, obviously, if you do that, that's fantastic. You know, a solicitor know the terminology, the language that can be spoken in court and which can stand, but you don't need to. There are templates online which you can use, but having a good set of terms and conditions can prevent all of the going to court or preventing payments, making sure that everybody's clear in the first place. Now, I have some very standard terms and conditions. Obviously, they may change slightly depending on what type of work you do, but make sure it's clear and make sure they're available. So send them with the quotation. For my work that I do now, when I business coach, I send a link. I've got a link on my website. You can check out my terms and conditions. It's all straightforward. You know what you're getting. And I make sure people, this is the important thing, people agree to them. So when they sign up to coaching or buy anything from me, one of my courses, for example, like the How to Work Out Your Rate course, which is the best-selling course on my website, people have to accept and sign and agree that they've read the terms and conditions. Now, if they read them or not, obviously that's down to them, but they are there, they're available. Anybody can access them, nice and easy. You should do the same with your client. Make sure that it's easy to read and don't complicate them. Like I've seen some terms and conditions that are like pages and pages long. Keep it simple. People make it easy for people. People are lazy. Just make it easy for them to read and to understand. Don't use all this crazy terminology and language. Just keep it simple. Good set of terms and conditions. Make sure they agree to them. Next step, consider stage payments or deposit payments. Now, obviously, I've touched on this a little bit earlier, but there's no point giving people credit terms of like 60 days because that increases risks. Now, I understand some people, you are kind of tied, whatever line of work you're doing, you might be kind of tied to that particular type of client. But when people say to me, you know, we work for this client and their payment terms are 60, sometimes 90 days, and they're like, you know, we're not getting paid, it turns into 120 days and so forth, and cash flow is a massive problem. Well, I know this is easy for me to say, but change your client. Go back to select your client, go back to number one. Who do you want to work for? Now, personally, I always wanted to work for directly with the client. I didn't want to work for main contracts, didn't want to work for facilities companies because it's all increased risk down the chain. I wanted to work directly for the person who's going to pay my bill. I wanted a relationship with that person who pays my bill. But again, I'm not saying drop all of your work, just consider it. And in terms of payment terms, make it clear what the payment terms are on your quotation, on the terms and conditions that we just spoke about. What are the payment terms? So again, I found when I made people pay a deposit, I completely reduced the amount of late payments or non-payments that I got. But also stage payments. So if you're doing a 2-month project or whatever, make sure you get a deposit, payment in the middle, payment at the end, payment on completion. That's perfectly acceptable in my opinion, because at the beginning you're being paid a deposit to pay for some materials and stuff in advance. You're being paid in the middle because you've got to pay for your guys, and you're being paid at the end because you complete the project and you've got to pay for all the bits at the end. It's completely reasonable. And if somebody doesn't accept that, obviously that's your choice to choose if you accept to do the work or not. It's completely up to you. I had one client that come to me doing some firearm works, and he said he gets paid 60 days, and he said, I have to pay you 60 days. And I was like, I didn't really want to, I didn't do that. But at the end of the day, I've credit checked him. He's got loads of stuff online. I was pretty happy with the client, and it wasn't much money. It was about $2,000 a month, which in the grand scheme of things, I was turning over in excess of 80 grand a month, sometimes more. So $2,000 to me was, a small risk. Obviously, $2,000 for somebody else is massive. So just have a think about, how you are getting paid and when, and make it clear from the beginning. Get them to sign and accept that so everybody's clear from the start. Now, the next tip is very simple. Do a bloody good job. If you do a bloody good job, there's no reason to argue your workmanship or anything to do with the work, because you've got your nice detailed quotation, you've done all the work as it should be, you've carried out a professional works from your engineers, from you, from your management team, and then there's no arguments. If there's no arguments, there's no conflict, everything should just flow nice and easy. Now, I understand it doesn't happen always like that, but it increases the chances of being paid if you make sure you do the job that you said you're going to do, because you've said, you give me £2,000 and you're going to get X, Y, and Z. Now they're expecting X, Y, and Z for £2,000. If you don't do X, Y, and Z and you're missing out bits, or the workmanship isn't quite good, or they wasn't happy with how you done it, like you're never turning up, or you send some guys that made a mess and didn't clean up and stuff like that, it increases a little bit of conflict and people do think in their heads. And bear in mind, the consumer's rights, they actually are in a position that if you do not perform workmanship which is acceptable, that you don't have to pay everything. Just bear that in mind when you're working for consumers, you're working for homeowners. Just bear that in mind. If your workmanship isn't, and don't get me wrong, it's down to interpretation, but if you make sure you do everything what you're supposed to, you do a fantastic job, it increases the chance of you getting paid. The next tip is detail your invoice. Now, the amount of invoices I've seen that just say worked as per estimate, literally worked as per estimate. Like, for what? Bear in mind, some of these clients that you might work for might receive 100 invoices a month, or it might go to a finance manager or admin or something like that. And they're going to be approving these invoices and they're going to go, what the bloody hell is that? Worked as per estimate. What does that mean? Attach a worksheet, an engineer worksheet, attach anything, certificates, attach whatever, and make sure that your details saying as per quotation, list your quotation number, list the date that you sent it, make sure everything's there and easy. Now, people like the path of least resistance, just like electricity. So what you need to do is make sure you make it easy for them. If on your quotation, again, on invoices, I've seen so many and it says bank transfer, but it doesn't actually say, give them all the details they need to pay. And people send a separate thing. Look, put your bank details and say, you can pay me via X, Y, or Z, and give them the options, make it easy for people to pay. And make sure you're sending your invoices quickly. There's no point sending an invoice 3 months later because you need it to be fresh in the head. The next tip is getting your invoices in quickly. Like, it's so important to make sure that once you do a job, you're completing the paperwork and everything as soon as you possibly can. I can't stress enough because again, it's fresh in people's minds. You don't want them, a job to be 6 months down the line and you're invoicing really, really late, because it needs to be fresh, and obviously they need to budget for it, because if they've given you a contract, they've given you a job, they've set aside the budget and obviously it's there to spend. But if it goes 6 months down the line, they may have allocated that somewhere else or whatever because they forgot about it. So just make sure that you're getting invoices in quickly. Then the next tip is making it easy to pay. Now, this is the thing that is really effective, and so many people I know they hum and ha about it, but it's about making card payments or automated payments online. There's so many platforms out there these days where you can attach your invoice to your whole invoicing system that they have an option to pay by card, by PayPal. Now, I was manually invoicing, and when I changed to automated payments, i.e. people could pay via PayPal or they could pay via Stripe, I recently have done that with my coaching, and nobody has taken longer than 24 hours to pay me. So it's increased the payment. Whereas before I was doing a bank transfer because obviously it's an easy method, it's free, and some people might take a bit of time, because let's face it, when you've got to make a bank transfer to a new person, it is a pain in the arse depending who you bank with. Some people can do it really easy with apps on their phone, but other people might have to go on their laptop and then you get a verification number or whatever on your phone. It's all a bit of a pain in the arse sometimes. So if you make it easy for people to pay, now obviously when you do that, you do have to give a small percentage, sometimes a big percentage, to PayPal, Stripe, or whoever you're using. But when you sum it up, I think making it within contracting, cash flow is so important. So getting the money in is quickly. So I would consider giving a little percentage away to these payment companies, these payment portals, and making it easy. Now also, I've got automated payments and invoicing. So when somebody orders something with me, I can send an invoice in seconds. I actually have started recently using an application called Zoho Books, which for me works very well. For contractors, it could work well, but it depends kind of what you're doing. So if you want to know more about it, put in the comments below and I'll answer any questions. But I can create a contact in seconds like that, and I can create an invoice in seconds like that, boom, done. Now it's all automated. So the client gets the invoice and they have the methods of payment. They can pay via bank transfer, they can pay via PayPal or Stripe. And it's very easy. They get an automated email as soon as I create the invoice, and they can click a link to it and they can download the invoice as well for their accounting records. They can click a link on it and they can pay. Now when it gets paid, it's all automated, so my system recognises that they've paid and I haven't got to do a thing. It's so simple, it's so effective, I haven't got to chase money, and even if they don't pay, it can send them out email reminders. So it's all quick, easy. I've made it so easy for people to pay, and it's increased how quickly I'm being paid. Very simple and straightforward. Now the next tip is communicate with your client. Communication causes a lot of problems if communication isn't there and it's a breakdown. So make sure you're keeping people up to date throughout the whole project process. And people like that human element, just check in with them, make sure that people are happy. When you do a job, I always ask for reviews. When they're doing a review, and let's say they've given you a 5-star, said, oh, your lads are absolutely great, they've done a great job, and they've written online, then there's no argument, is there? So I'd make sure that I'm always communicating, making sure things are okay, making sure everything's good, and that's part of your management procedure. Even if you're a one-man band, this is really important to build that communication. And that relationship, building relationships with a client is great. Now, again, I've got a little bit of a theory that if you've got a good relationship, a good business relationship with your client, they're less likely to knock you for money. If you build up that relationship with that client, it decreases the chance of being knocked for money because there's some form of emotional attachment. Whereas if you're just dealing with people by a computer and you don't really feel that human energy between you, then sometimes people are like, well, I don't know this person, so if they're being a bit funny, even if it's a bigger organisation, you're like, well, I don't care about this person because I don't know them. Whereas if they actually know you, relationships are so important in business, so make sure you communicate correctly. Now the final tip is don't be scared about going legal. Obviously everything we've done so far should be okay, but sometimes it isn't. I get that. So the next step, if somebody's not paid, I personally would send a little reminder out about the invoice. My system does it automatically, but I think also like a little message, however you communicate with your clients, and just say, just to let you know, invoice 1295 hasn't been paid yet, and resend the invoice, resend the worksheets, resend everything that goes with it, and say, can you please let us know when it's going to be paid? Sometimes people just forget. So just a gentle reminder. Now, write yourself a reminder again in a week's time if they still haven't paid, do the same thing again, but this time say, if we do not receive payment within, and give them a time frame within 5 days or whatever, I would say, I will be passing this to our legal team. And I wouldn't be bolshy, I wouldn't be nasty, I would just literally be quite casual and friendly and leave it in their hands. And if they don't, seek legal advice. Now, I don't give legal advice. I've had to consult solicitors in the past for quite large non-payments, but generally everything I've spoken to you before kind of does work. I wouldn't go to a solicitor without completely needing to, because they are expensive. It can cause a lot of stress, a lot of aggravation, but don't be scared about getting legal. It is your money. If you've done a job, if you've done a good job, remember, you have to do a good job. And if you've done everything, you've given all the paperwork, you've given the invoice, you've given all the details, it's your right to receive that money. So don't get scared about it. Now, obviously, this video is tips. Hopefully it's helpful to some of you. I'm not a solicitor, so please don't take everything I've said for complete read. This is just from my experience and my advice based on my experience. If you like this video, please give it a whacking thumbs up, and I'd like to hear your comments about some of your past experiences with late payments and things you have tried, or any questions you've got about how to improve what you do. Let me know. I'm Dan the Engineer, I'm in Bali, I'm going to dip in a pool. I'll see you later. Bye.